Hello, and welcome to the Rock Metal Podcast. I'm your host, John Harris, and today on the Rock Metal Podcast, we have PHIL Stiles. He has a new album called The Anchorhold, released on September 17th via Trepanation Records. Right now, I'm being joined by what I'm told is PHIL Stiles himself to talk about these Anchorholds. So, Phil, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Hi, nice to be here.
Pleasure indeed, and for those who've been following the Rock Metal Podcast more religiously than I do, number one, thank you. Number two, you'll know that Phil has been on the show before. Twice, even, with his other band that is just not important right now. Because what's important right now is Phil's solo stuff. Because in 2020, Phil, you released an EP called The Anchorite.
That's right, yeah.
The Angry Rabbit just left the car.
No, that was my wife randomly bringing back a whole load of books on psychiatry.
When you have an angry rabbit, you have to know how to deal with it, Phil.
That's true. That is a fair point.
Yeah, we got to talk about the mental health of rabbits right now, especially when they're angry. Do you feel your rabbit is affected at all by the pandemic? Like, have you noticed a different behavioral pattern in the rabbit?
I think the rabbit's just annoyed that I've been at home for 18 months and obviously just badgering him all day. Because, you know, when you're just trapped at home and you're working online, you get into a habit of coming downstairs and you want to poke the rabbit. Like, hey, you know, talk to me.
Yeah.
He never talks back.
Oh. Okay. Well, I was hoping it wouldn't end this way because I'm not done yet.
Nice. I like that.
Thank you. So in 2020, you released an EP, which must have not come across my desk or whatever, because we didn't chat about that EP, but we can chat about it now, The Anchorite, which then turned into this album, The Anchorhold. I'm seeing a pattern with anchors. So let's talk about that. Why is the anchor up? Is the anchor down? Are you fascinated with, the seaside? What's going on, Phil?
There was a book called The Dogs of God by Pickney Benedict, came out in the mid-1990s, I think. And it was a book about a series of kind of characters whose kind of fates were all interconnected. And one of the characters was this nameless individual called the Anchorite, who, amongst other things, possessed this quality of unshakable faith, which is what defines an anchorite. An anchorite is a religious recluse, a hermit, who dedicates their life to a cause without fear or favor. And I kind of liked that idea, the anchorite, as a kind of analog for the increasing way that people seem to have sort of developed unshakable faith in certain causes, whether it's Brexit here in England or the MAGA movement in America or the conspiracy theories that kind of dominate a whole range of different sort of aspects of society. So yeah, the Anchorite, which was very kind of socio-political commentary on kind of where things were going with Brexit in the UK, was sort of a comment on that, if you like. And the Anchorhold kind of is a little bit more expansive. It's an album rather than EP. And the Anchorhold was the place where the Anchorite was basically put. If you were an anchorite, very often, not always, but very often, you were declared kind of officially dead. You were dead to the world, and you dedicated your life to God, and you basically got put in this little kind of cell, the Anchorhold, and you had like a little window out on the world through which you could dispense wisdom. And again, I kind of like that kind of the analog to people who sit behind a keyboard and dispense their kind of wisdom through this very kind of narrow ideological view. So yeah, the Anchorite, the historical perspectives are really interesting, but I first came across it through this book by Pickney Benedict, The Dogs of God, which it's a fantastic book. It was very, very cool. And I like the name, and I thought it would be something that would work well for a kind of a narrative, perhaps without being too didactic, if you like.
Mm-hmm. I have the wrong book in front of me then. It's the one I found is by James Reston Jr.
No, that's not it. No. I'll have to find it. Unfortunately, if I was at home, it would be on my bookshelf. I still have that book. Mm-hmm. I think it's Pickney Benedict is the name of the author for sure.
Benedict. Probably spelling his first name wrong, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Cool. No, because I like books. Books are fun. Start a book club. That's what we should do. I definitely enjoy that. And so it sounds like it's a commentary on what we'll call the status of the world at the current moment, and what I'm calling evolution and process, as some people who are not adapting to the current circumstances and demands on the human system are leaving us.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. Well, I'll sidestep the bit about the evolution for now. But no,
Sure.
I think your point is right. I mean, the whole idea of the anchorite is, it's always very interesting to me, whether you look at organized religion or whether you kind of go before the kind of patristic religions that we, that are currently, our thing, or if you move forward to the more secular society that we have today. In all instances, you've got this kind of need amongst people, I think, to have this kind of absolute certainty. And that absolute certainty displaces reason. So, when you're arguing with, for example, a Brexiteer, or if you're arguing with someone from the MAGA movement, or if you're arguing even with an anti-vaxxer, logic and reason goes out the window. It's not a discussion. It's basically a series of kind of talking points which are kind of flung. I think, we're all guilty of that to a degree. I try not to be. I prefer to take an approach where I enter into any discussion willing to take on board what other people have to say. And at the end of it, if they've produced a compelling argument, I'm willing to move forward with that. But equally, I feel that, arguments need to be supported by kind of evidence and reason, and there needs to be a lot of give and take from both sides. And I think you don't see a lot of that now. So you're right. It's a social commentary, and it's very much a commentary on that kind of inability to see past your own very fixed worldview. And the anchorite, of course, was exactly that. The anchorite was a religious recluse who was dedicated entirely to this one religious movement. And it's an interesting thing to me. I find that kind of faith, that unshakable faith, very, very interesting and very useful kind of material for songwriting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. Is that why in the artwork, I was looking at the artwork, is this where the sun is shining through that cage? Is that where the anchorite is supposed to be dispensing wisdom through the Anchorhold?
Yeah. So the Anchorhold, like I say, was like the cell. Usually, it was like appended to a church or something. And the anchorite would sort of go into this cell. They would live in there. They weren't spoken to. They didn't interact with the real world except occasionally to dispense kind of religious wisdom. And that's the point where they might pass through some word of God, some deep thought that they had in relation to this. And so the Anchorhold was the place that they were in. And when Yola, my wife, started to create the artwork for the album, she tried a whole number of different things, but she had this image which, funnily enough, was taken during a video shoot for Final Coil. And it was really appropriate. It was attractive but slightly sinister with that kind of metalwork over it. But you had the sun shining through, and it seemed like it could be kind of a literal representation of the Anchorhold, and we thought that it worked really well.
Absolutely. Now I'm watching the music video for End This Way. Are these all real places you guys found?
Yep.
Okay.
It's found footage, I think probably filmed in Russia maybe, or somewhere, Eastern Europe. It's not clear. There's quite a lot of sites that deal with this sort of footage that's usable, and the content creator who did this, guy called Lee Waters, who's really good. He talked to me about the theme of the song, and then put that together, and I thought it fitted really well.
Indeed. I guess my question is, how come End This Way gets the video, and what is the theme of the video, or what is the theme of End This Way?
End This Way is based on another book. So this is one for your social commentary. The book itself is by a writer called Rebecca Radil, and she wrote a book called 1666, and then there's a subtitle which I think is Hellfire, War and Plague, or something like that. And basically it was about this very turbulent period in English history where we got hit by the plague, and of course, a number of other issues, warfare and so on. And one of the interesting things that hit me in this book was that there's a description of people living through the plague years, and when you got the plague, or when your household got the plague, you got locked in your house, obviously. So you got segregated from society. But people, of course, were not happy about this, so they would open their windows and they would lean out and breathe on people walking past, hoping that they could spread their disease to these uninfected people walking past their windows.
It sounds familiar, Phil.
Yeah, when I was writing this album, the newspapers were full of stories of people spitting at others, kind of, I've got coronavirus. And I thought, my God, have we evolved so little? Have we changed so little since 1666?
Speaking of evolution.
Right, exactly. So, I read that book at the beginning of the outbreak. It was, it's been sat on my shelf for a little while, but I started reading through, and it just was the perfect subject matter for a song. So, in that context, End This Way could be, I don't want to end this way, I don't want to die from this disease. Or it could equally be, I don't want to become this person who is so bitter and so twisted that I want to inflict something that I've contracted by chance upon others. And I thought is quite an interesting dual meaning. And End This Way. And that's the reason it was a single. It just felt like one of the album's quite, dark and trippy, and it felt like one of the more dynamic numbers. It had quite an obvious chorus on it. So, with my kind of producer's hat on, it was kind of like, that's an obvious choice to make.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So quite a few books went into the crafting of the Anchorhold, the album.
I think if you look at everything I do, literature plays a very big part. Final Coil is very heavily influenced by, the name itself was influenced by Shakespeare and Dante, and then there was one of the tracks on the first record was a direct commentary on Hemingway, For Whom the Bell Tolls. I think you can find inspiration in so many different places, but I'm an avid reader. I love reading. I'm always interested in finding new authors, new books, and I'll read anything. Not anything, but I'll read anything that's good. And I love history. I love classic literature, and I enjoy some pulp fiction as well. It sort of depends on your need at the time. But I think there's a turn of phrase, a simple idea, an entire book can provide real inspiration for song lyrics. So I like to bring that in, and if I see parallels, like with 1666, then that's like a gift. Of course, I'm going to use that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, makes sense. You heard it right here on the Rock Metal Podcast. I'm just going to do this again later on in life. Very cool. Nervous laughter. Anyway, cool. So we talked about anchorites. I looked up some information on that. I saw some placards and some signs from 1326 regarding these sorts of people. And they were so useful that we keep them around and we still have them. We talked about Brexit, and that's fun. MAGA, that's even more fun. The attempted movement to try and bring that to Canada by the Conservative Party of Canada, which is unsuccessful. Make Canada great again. Cool. And then we chatted about Unshakable Faith. I guess it's not real faith. I guess that's another question. I guess in your studies, have you dissected what is true faith from just an ideological, arrogant set point?
No, not in any great detail, but it's an interesting point of discussion. The nature of faith and unshakable belief. I think you can argue that faith is something that is dangerous in the world in which we live today, because it's one of those things that does not require explanation. It doesn't require rational argument. I suppose that would be what would differentiate faith from ideology. And that's to a degree what makes, for me at least, some of this stuff, like Brexit, like MAGA, it's what makes it so dangerous, because it steps away from ideology where you've got a structured belief system which you can agree with or disagree with, and it steps towards a completely irrational statement of what is from your perspective. And I think that's what makes Unshakable Faith so worrying for me. And if you trace that back through the various religions, that same unshakable faith, led to things like the Salem witch trials, or like the Spanish Inquisition. These sorts of things go back, and there's no explanation. There's never a point where someone sits down and tries to rationalize, because with faith, you don't have to. In fact, if anything, trying to rationalize it is actively dangerous to faith, because it contradicts the belief. Yeah. So the belief becomes all consuming. And I think you can see that in a lot of the conspiracy theories that are floating around. I've had discussions with a number of people who are conspiracy theorists one way or another, and they, if you try to bring logic or evidence into it, it becomes, you need to wake up, you're a sheeple. It's like, well, that's great. These are wonderful phrases, but they don't take us anywhere. Okay, show, where's your evidence? No, you don't need evidence. You just have to know. You have to believe. Where do you go from this? You can't go anywhere. So it becomes a circular and rather harrowing discussion that leaves you wanting to bang your head against the wall. And I think, both the Anchorite and the Anchorhold are born out of that frustration.
Don't do that, Phil. Don't bang your head against the wall.
I don't know. It'll probably damage the wall more than my head.
It's very true. In all the years I've known you, you've damaged quite a few walls with your head, so. That's fantastic. Yeah, it's good to get all the conspiracy theories on a Venn diagram, I guess. My favorite is to call up Australia and say, so you guys real yet? Where are you actually?
Well, they're underneath.
That's right. Underneath
just floating on the bottom.
Yeah. Underneath all the elephants holding the world up because it's flat.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Cool. All right.
No, we don't have so much of that over here. We don't encounter that one as much in England, I have to say. I think that there are plenty of flat earthers floating around, but not so many, obviously, here. But of anti-vaxxers, we have many. And Brexiters, too many.
Yeah, I would imagine, because of the historical significance of England sailing around the world, and the sun never sets on the English Empire kind of thing, it'd be really hard to imagine it being flat, maybe, because you guys sailed around so much.
You'd like to think that kind of common sense approach fed into it, wouldn't you?
I'm approaching it from somebody who knows the world is round, so I think that's my problem, Phil. I got to get into the mind of somebody who thinks we're gonna fall off the edge. So, okay. So today we chatted about the record, the Anchorhold. We also got in there the EP, the Anchorite. And I guess one other question, if you have the time.
I have plenty of time. Yeah, we're all good.
Production-wise, was there something that you wanted to do differently after you did the EP? You saw the response from the EP, songwriting, production. I mean, everything from keyboards, guitar tones, drums, whatever. What did you then take into the Anchorhold? What kind of breadcrumbs do we find there? Did you say, yep, copy and paste, I loved it, let's do it again? Or did you take the chance to say, let's do something different?
I never expected to do an album. I think that's probably the first sort of step to this. Yeah, the reason I did the Anchorite is because in 2018, I was contacted by a band out in Italy called The Way of Purity, and they asked me to do.
I know them. I know The Way of Purity. I don't know why I'm saying it like that. I'm sorry.
I don't know. You went very Monty Python then for a second. Are you going to start asking for spam in a minute?
I will. Well, you did mention the Inquisition. Nobody expects a Spanish Inquisition. The comfy chair.
Spam.
Yeah. Not the comfy chair.
That's going to be on the menu here very soon. We got fuel shortages, we got food shortages. Anyway, I digress. So The Way of Purity, they asked me to do an outro track. They asked me to do the final track. And I'd been messing around with some, kind of dirgy electronica for a long time. And I never really sort of felt compelled to finish it because I was always focused on Final Coil. So I sent them a number of tracks, and they chose one, and then I sent the kind of stems to their mixer, and he said, "Look, it's fine. You don't need to mix this. It's done." And I could have thought, "Oh, okay, well that's kind of cool." So off the kind of back of that, I suddenly had this confidence to finish some pieces that had been floating around my studio for a long time that weren't really Final Coil pieces, and that became the Anchorite. I did all the lyrics kind of at the time, but the music had been around for a while. So the Anchorite came out, And yeah, it got, it got some really nice reviews. It got some good feedback. People seemed to dig it. And I was quite happy to kind of leave it there. I was going off to do the next Final Coil record anyway. And then, of course, kind of lockdown happened. And, I went from playing 2 rehearsals a week and probably a gig a month to playing nothing. I wasn't seeing my band because one of them was sheltering and another was like with his kids, and we didn't want to risk, getting into an environment where anyone might get infected. So I was just locked away in my house, and I really felt this absence of any sort of musical community. People were talking, but there was nothing kind of happening, that kind of creative pulse. So I had some songs that had been kicking around, and I thought it would be really cool if I reached out to a bunch of people that I'd shared a stage with or I'd talked to, but I'd never played with. So I reached out to the Medea Project, who are South African, although currently in Nottingham in England. 2 guys in Leicester, Matt Steady, a folk singer, and Richard Alsop, who's like an amazing kind of guitarist. He's with a band called Monochopsis. I reached out to a guy in America called Kyle Brandt. Absolutely amazing dude who plays with a post-rock band called A Light Within and his own project Molotov. I reached out to a guy called Mark Gatland who plays in a prog band in London called Hats Off Gentlemen, It's Adequate. And I reached out to a guy called Roger Mortar, really good friend of mine, but also in this really cool band called Pornographic Sunset up in Leeds. And last but not least, I reached out to one of my old bandmates, Tomek Wulski, who lives in Poland, and we were in a prog band called Metanoia together. And the idea was that I would just do this thing. I would send them a track and it'd be no pressure. Probably half of them would send me something back, and maybe it would be okay and maybe not. So I sent these tracks out. These guys were fantastic. They all sent me amazing things back. So I started to mix and master. And basically, you asked about production, and I would say what changed is I learned a lot of stuff. Like basically everything I did wrong on the Anchorite, I kind of realized, okay, that could have been louder. That was a bit bassy. That's not separated enough. So all of that experience then went into mixing the Anchorhold. And because these people, these amazing people, gave me their time and their skills, I was more like careful, I guess, than I would be if it was just me. I wanted to do them justice and make the album the best that I possibly could. So I spent probably 3 or 4 months kind of, just working through it. I bought a whole bunch of new software to make it sound better, like basically plugins that I could use for the production, things like EQing software and just like random like amp plugins and new drum sets. Actually ended up re-recording probably about a third of what I'd done to match the quality of what they'd done. And at the end of it, I kind of had this record, and I suddenly thought, God, this is. I was really proud of it. I thought it was at that point one of the best things that I'd done. It was so I sent that off to master with the guy who did the last one, James Plotkin, who has done stuff at ISIS and Merzbow and Carnate, absolute legend. And again, at that point, if it was just me, I probably wouldn't have taken it any further. But because I had these musicians who had given me their time and done this amazing work, I then started kind of shopping it around to labels, and Trepanation, a guy called Dan, came back to me and said, yes, they put it out. They do it on cassette and CD. And that's where we are. But yeah, when you talk about production, the mechanics of it were better because I got better and I learned a lot. And I think you can hear the kind of the naivety on the Anchorite, and you can hear it's better on the Anchorhold. And already I'm recording stuff that's better again. But yeah, I mean, it's a learning process for sure. Mm-hmm. But more, I think it's about having that engagement from these other people who were just so amazingly cool and friendly and helpful and just wanted to do this thing because we were all locked down. We were all separated from our bands and our projects. And it was a community thing. And that's why it sounds the way it does, why it sounds a bit different, perhaps, although still, I hope, coherent.
Cool. All right. So and
you wanted, wasn't it? You were hoping I was going to go EQing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, baby. EQ is everything. Yeah, that's one of my favorite questions in recording is, like, well, what does things do? Like, well, compressors compress, EQs equalize. What did you need to know? Reverbs reverberate. I don't know. What do you need to know? And people are like, it's not that simple. It is. You're just making it complicated. Cool.
I don't know what half the things do. I just basically press buttons until it sounds right.
There you
Sorry,
go.
I'm probably demystifying things a little bit.
I know. Well, I demystified compressors when I said that they compress.
It's not.
I know.
Is it?
I know. Sweet. Okay. We chatted about the Anchorhold, new album out from PHIL Styles. Today's show notes will have philstylesofficial.com, and the record is available wherever you consume music. So go ahead and grab it. And if you need to, you can look them up on the Google. But otherwise, if you go onto the today's show notes, philstylesofficial.com is a link that you can click, as well as a link to the music video for End This Way. The Anchorhold, September 17th via Trepanation Records, out now. Phil, thank you so much for coming on to the Rock Metal Podcast today.
Oh, dude, it's always a pleasure. We've had a few meetings now. I think this is number 3 on the show. And it's always so cool to see you and to have a chat. So thank you very much. And I hope we'll have, I know we've got a new Final Coil EP in December. And hopefully a new album next year as well. So hopefully we'll come back and bug you again. Maybe not from a service station next time.
Beautiful. I love it.